Good morning. My name is Denise McDonald, and I'm the Executive Director here at Old City Cemetery, Museums and Arboretum. We are glad you, all of our special guests here today, are here with us live, and our viewers on Facebook Live. This is a new experiment for us in these COVID times, so we're very glad to be able to celebrate the African American heritage of Old City Cemetery today. And it's my special pleasure to welcome two City Council members today. We have Mayor Tweedy, who will be speaking to us shortly, and also Bo Wright. Thank you so much for coming, one of our members at large. And we also have several of our board members here today. I would like to recognize board member John Hughes, who's right over here, who will also be speaking shortly. And then we have a couple of folks, if they could step forward, Liz Perry Sizemore and Aubrey Chow-Barber, who are both on our board community relations committee and have been instrumental in moving this program forward. I would also like to mention that Clay Simmons, who is not here today, has been very active in helping to move this project forward. Oh, there he is. Clay, working with Kirk Schultz, and they have been wonderful in being creative to help us make this a very special place for African American history and heritage in our community. So thank you to Clay and Kirk. Also, Ted Delaney. I would be remiss if I didn't mention my predecessor, former director of Old City Cemetery, who's now the city director of the Lynchburg Museum System. I know he's added so much to our research here. We wouldn't be where we are today without all that Ted has done. Thank you, Ted. So let me tell you a little bit about Old City Cemetery before we go on to introduce a couple of speakers. I think many of you know that Old City Cemetery is one of the oldest cemeteries in continuous use in America. It was founded in 1806 by our city founder, John Lynch, and we have about 20,000 people buried here. These people come from all walks of life, rich and poor, black and white, enslaved and free. We have residents here who are soldiers, judges, teachers, ministers, politicians, even a college president. And we're here to try to give honor and significance to these wonderful people who came before us. 2/3 of the people buried here are African American, and these are people who helped build the city of Lynchburg. These are people who helped to make it the diverse and wonderful place that it is today. We are proud of the rich cultural heritage that these African Americans have contributed to our community, and we want to recognize and honor their contributions in a concrete way, and that's why we're building a pathway to pride, which we're here to do groundbreaking for today. We chose the name Pathway to Pride for 3 reasons. This brick pathway will ultimately lead directly behind me to the family grave plot of Amelia Perry Pride, who's one of our most noteworthy African Americans buried here. This location around me happens to be in the center of one of our African American sections of the cemetery. And of course, we have great pride in all of these people and what they have done and contributed to our community. We regularly offer African Americans through our special tours, our programs, lectures, concerts, but today we want to recognize them by this concrete effort to pave a pathway to pride. I'm going to turn it over now to Mayor Tweedy, who will talk to us a little bit more about Amelia Perry Pride and her family and their significance to us. Mayor Tweedy.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's an honor to be here today. Let me get unconnected. Thank you. I'm very excited to be here today and to participate in this special project at our city cemetery. Much like her family's large monument behind me, Amelia Pride stands tall and proud in the history of our city. She was a woman who dedicated her life to giving back to her community and uplifting the most vulnerable around her. After Pride graduated from Hampton University in the 1870s, she became one of the first African American teachers hired to teach in the Lynchburg City Schools. She retired as the principal of the Polk Street Colored School after 30 years of teaching. Most of her students were the first generation in their family to receive a formal education. Amelia Pride was a woman of endless energy. Besides raising a family, including 3 sons and several adopted daughters, she operated sewing and cooking schools for African American youth in a house across the street from her residence on Madison Street. At a time when most black citizens of Lynchburg lived in poverty, basic life skills like sewing and cooking were critical lifelines to survival and economic independence. Pride also established a small old folks' home on Pierce Street for homeless women who had been born into slavery. She said she believed their last years should be their best. Amelia Pride was constantly raising funds and gathering donations for local causes: firewood for the poor in winter, clothing and shoes for the needy, books for her school's library, and scholarships for promising students. If you've ever heard of the Pride Center, which we all have, on the campus of Dunbar Middle School, you may not know it was named in memory of Amelia Pride in 1949 as a tribute to her many contributions to public education in Lynchburg. Now, this brick pathway to her gravesite will help bring new attention to a remarkable woman who still inspires us today. Along this path, you will discover more remarkable individuals besides Amelia Pride. The people surrounding her here represent 150 years of our city's history. They were rich and poor, enslaved and free, laborers and professionals. Each one has a story to tell and lessons to teach. Amelia Pride knew well what we are all learning in the challenges of our own time. We are all in this together, and when we help the least among us, we all benefit. I'm honored to participate in this special event, and now it is my pleasure to introduce John H. Hughes IV, board member of the Southern Memorial Association that manages the old cemetery. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Tweedy. I'm honored to be a member of the Southern Memorial Association and the Old City Cemetery, and I've served on the board for the past 2 years. I'm proud that this organization is continuously serves our mission of engaging our community through history and horticulture. Today we are specifically focused on the history of our community and the 13,000 African Americans who are buried in this historic cemetery and museum property, as Denise mentioned earlier. Mayor Tweedy told you about Amelia Pride and our pathway to pride, and we have hundreds more stories of pride and the people who are buried here. In recent years, I've attended our annual Cemeteries Candlelight tours, the history program which tells real-life stories of our residents, through our October evening tours by lantern and candlelight. Among those featured are Frank Trigg. He's one of our nation's first African American college presidents. Professor Trigg was born into slavery. As a teenager, he worked on the Abingdon, Virginia farm of former Governor John Floyd, and later on the farm of lawyer Robert Hughes. After the Civil War ended, he continued working on Hughes's farm until he lost the use of his arm due to a threshing machine accident. Trigg said that lawyer Hughes sent him to Hampton Institute, where he became friends with Booker T. Washington and ultimately graduated and began a 52-year career as an educator. A prolific writer, his life is well documented, and he married a fellow educator, Ellen Preston Trigg, and they had 11 children over many years. Trigg taught school, received many promotions, moved to Maryland to become president of Princess Anne Academy, which later became the University of Maryland, Eastern Shore, and then became president of Bennett College in Greensboro, North Carolina, before he and Ellen retired to Lynchburg, where he remained until he passed away in 1933. You may have seen his Virginia historical marker nearby on Pierce Street as he's buried just down the hill. Another story that was highlighted in the cemetery's candlelight tours was about Philip Pleasant Whiteley, who's buried near the Hearst House Museum. Pleasant was born an enslaved person on the plantation of Hopkins Whiteley in Bedford County. As a young man during the Civil War, he somehow escaped from this plantation, made his way north, enlisted in the 43rd Regiment of the U.S. Colored Infantry. He survived the war and faced decisions whether to come to Lynchburg, home to Lynchburg, or go further north. Ultimately, he chose to return to Lynchburg, where he lived with his sister and his family, bought property on Floyd Street, just a block from here, and worked at different jobs as a laborer, coachman, butler, gardener for a few families. He died at age 87 and is one of 3 known African American Union veterans of the Civil War buried at Old City Cemetery. Lastly, we also have my great-grandparents. My great-grandfather, Reverend Frank B. Woodard, and his wife, Rosa Woodard. They are also buried here. Reverend Frank Woodard came from Iowa to study ministry at Virginia Seminary and College, which is now the Virginia University of Lynchburg. He had a strong and long career in ministry in Iowa. My great-grandmother, Rosa Jones Woodard, grew up in Tinbridge Hill, attended the teacher training program at Virginia Seminary, met and married my great-grandfather Frank, and then after he died, she returned to Lynchburg and returned to Virginia Seminary, where she was a matron as well as a teacher for several years. So the history continues. Our board continues in its mission to educate and share our local history with our community and beyond. I invite you to check out our website, www.gravegarden.org, the calendar events, and join us for candlelight tours and other programs. So before we pick up our garden shovels for this groundbreaking, I know Denise has a few directions and instructions for us as always. So Denise, thank you for this opportunity. Thank everyone that came and participated in this event, and I welcome your further direction.
Thank you, John Hughes, and we're so glad to have you on our board and appreciate your leadership greatly. And speaking of education, I wanted to also recognize City School Superintendent Crystal Edwards, who is right here with us also. Education is a very important part of our mission, and we couldn't do it without the support of our local schools. We're very glad that you're here today. Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, Clay Simmons and Kirk are here, who from the City Public Works Department. Both of them and Gaynell, the chair of the department, have been very active in making this effort possible for us. I'd like to thank Clay especially and Kurt for suggesting we use some of the extra bricks from the Harrison Street water project that happen to be extras and are perfect for our setting here today. It even so happens that they are dated 1906, which is exactly 100 years of the year of our starting. So thank you both for that. And thank you all for joining us for this historic occasion. If you're interested in being more involved with the cemetery, we welcome volunteers, we welcome donors and gifts. And if you'd like to help in any way, please call our office or let me know. Yeah. All right. 1, 2, 3, dig. 1, 2, 3, go for it. It's great.
Yeah, right.